I'm calling the public meeting to order for the Township of Frontenac Island. We begin this gathering by acknowledging and celebrating these traditional lands as a gathering place for the first peoples and their ancestors who are entrusted to care for Mother Earth since time immemorial. We do so respecting both the land and the Indigenous people who continue to walk with us through this world. Today, the Township of Frontenac Islands is committed to working with Indigenous peoples and all residents to pursue a united path of reconciliation. Now, is there any declaration of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Seeing none, the purpose of this meeting is the planning report of minor variance application A0125H at 925 North Shore Road. And we have Dimitri from the county to speak with us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So before I get started on my portion of the presentation, I'm just going to read the procedure and statements, so I'll do some housekeeping. This morning, council will be conducting one public meeting under the authority of the Planning Act. The meeting pertains to a minor variance application for a property located at 925 North Shore Road on Howe Island. Personal information collected as a result of the public meeting is collected under the authority of the Municipal Act, the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection and Privacy Act, the Planning Act, and all other relevant legislation, and will be used to assist in making decisions on the matters. All names, addresses, opinions, and comments may be collected and may form part of the minutes that will be available to the public. Questions regarding this collection should be forwarded to the township clerk. Any person who wishes to receive a copy of the minutes of a public meeting, a copy of any planning report, or a notice of council's decision, or any of the applications should indicate their full name, address, postal code, and other relevant contact information to the clerk prior to leaving the meeting. If a person or public body does not make an oral submission at the public meeting or make a written submission to the Township of Frontenac Islands before council makes a decision on the planning application, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision to the Township of Frontenac Islands to the Ontario Land Tribunal, and may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Land Tribunal unless, in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Please note that any specified persons in the Planning Act are permitted to appeal certain types of applications. The procedure for the public meeting will be as follows. The planner will provide the purpose of the public meeting and provide a brief overview of the application and summary of their review and recommendation. The applicant will then be provided with an opportunity to provide any comments that they have about their application or provide any background. Members of council will then have the opportunity to ask questions of the applicant and the planner. The chair will then inquire if there are any members of the public who wish to make an oral or written submission on the proposed application. If so, you should announce your name, mailing address before you providing your comments. Please be aware that anyone wishing to address the application should direct their comments and questions through the chair, which today is the mayor. So just bear with me while I open up my presentation. Okay. Okay, here we go. So the let's see what do you see on the screen? Okay, looks much better over there than it does on my screen. But anyway, this application at 925 North Shore Road proposes to construct a new two-story, 144 square meter or about 1,560 square foot garage. That's 6.9 meters or 23 feet in height. Located approximately 23 meters or 75 feet from the estimated high watermark of the St. Lawrence River. 6.9 meters in height translates to 2 stories, so it's a 2-story garage. The application also proposes a 2-story dwelling addition with a footprint of about 456 square feet. That's located about 14 meters from the estimated high watermark of the southern shoreline, and an 11.62 square meter or 125 square foot covered porch that'll be located 21 meters from the estimated high watermark of the northwest shoreline. This is an image of the subject property. The area where the addition is proposed is just the east or to the right of the existing dwelling, and that's indicated by an arrow on the top of the screen. The area proposed for the garage is just on the west side or the left side of the driveway that provides access to the property, and it is located on the east side of the driveway curve. This is a site plan or the drawing that was submitted in support of this application. As you can see, the covered porch addition is on the left side of the house or the west side of the house. The patio as well as the dwelling addition is located on the right or the east side of the house, and then the two-story garage is located just south of that on the inside corner of the driveway. So the reason why a variance is required for this application is because section 3.41 of the zoning bylaw requires all accessory buildings to be built to a maximum height of 5 meters or 16.4 feet. This translates to 1 story. So the zoning bylaw restricts all accessory buildings to 1 stories in height. The applicant is requesting for this to be increased to 6.9 meters or 23 feet, which is a variance request of 1.9 meters or 6.6 feet. So essentially the ask is to go from a 1-story garage to a 2-story garage. The second variance is related to the water body setback. Section 3.21 3.21.1 of the zoning bylaw requires all new development, including decks, to be located at a minimum of 30 meters between any structure or the water body or wetland. The applicant is proposing to reduce the water body setback to 23 meters for the proposed garage, which represents a variance of 7 meters or 21 feet. 14 meters for the proposed dwelling addition, which is a variance of 16 meters or 52 feet. And 21 meters for the proposed covered porch addition, and this represents a variance request of 9 meters or 30 feet. One thing I'll note here is that on the proposed existing dwelling is entirely located within the 30-meter water body setback. So anywhere where you add footprint to that dwelling, you're going to need a variance because you're essentially going to be reducing the minimum water body setback. So that dwelling was built prior to the zoning bylaw coming into effect, the 30-meter water body setback more specifically coming into effect. And therefore any addition or modification of the structure to a certain degree requires planning permission. The existing development on the property is a 220 square meter, 2,400 square foot dwelling. That's the subject dwelling. A sleep cabin, a storage shed, and then 2 accessory storage structures. And those 2 accessory storage structures are located right where that new garage is going to go. So those will be removed and replaced with this new proposed garage. The zoning for the property is SR1 or shoreline residential type 1, and the proposed uses are permitted in that zone.
Yeah.
The size of the property is just over 5 acres. There's approximately 250 meters of frontage of a North Shore Road and 250 meters of irregular shoreline on the St. Lawrence River. The shoreline meanders, but the way that we measure shorelines is just a straight line from corner to corner. So it's 250 meters as the crow flies. It doesn't take into consideration the curvature of the shoreline. This application was circulated to the Cutter Rockaway Region Conservation Authority, given its proximity to the water and the fact that the dwelling as well as the garage sits on top of a slope, and that slope descends down into the water. CRCA's involvement on this application was with respect to looking at flooding and slope stability. There's no issue with respect to flooding because the 2 proposed structures are high enough up that they're not impacted by the 100-year floodplain limit or the wave uprush. When CRCA went to assess the slope surrounding the property, they noted that the slope is stable. They suggested for all vegetations along the slope to be maintained. The reason for that is because the vegetation provides essentially rebar that stabilizes slope. So it's essential for vegetation to remain along that slope so that slope is not impacted and doesn't get either eroded into the water, or the weight of the structures that are sitting on top of the slope doesn't slowly start to erode the slope away. The CRCA require the maintenance of a minimum of 4-meter buffer between any new development and the slope for access purposes, and the applicant's site plan reflects that. There were no comments received from the public on this. So under section 45(1) of the Planning Act, a minor variance application is assessed under 4 criteria. The criteria is here on the screen, but what council and planning staff need to consider is the application minor? Is the application desirable and appropriate for the development of the land in question? Does the application conform to the general intent and purpose of the zoning bylaw? And does the application conform to the general intent and purpose of the official plan? Planning staff are of the opinion that this application meets all 4 criteria and are therefore recommending approval of the application. One thing I do want to note is with respect to the intent of the height restriction in the zoning bylaw. So at the time when the zoning bylaw was written, many municipalities in Ontario were restricting accessory structures on residential lands to be only 1 story in height. The reason for that is to prevent a second story loft or a second story dwelling from being built on top of garages. The rules in Frontenac Islands have not changed. So currently the zoning bylaw does not permit secondary dwelling units on waterfront property. So planning staff recommendation is for the applicant and the township to enter into a development agreement that basically says we recognize that the garage is going to have a second story, but you are not permitted to use that as a secondary dwelling unit. And a secondary dwelling unit is typically defined as a bedroom that's got its own bathroom, kitchen, and washroom facilities. The reason why we're recommending this development agreement isn't only because it's a second story. The garage is going to be 2 stories in height. It's because the garage is also going to be serviced, so it's going to be connected to the septic system. So our recommendation is before that septic connection is made and a building permit is issued for connection of the bathroom inside of the garage to the septic system, that the applicant enters into a development agreement with the township, basically stating we're not going to be using this as a secondary dwelling unit. So as I mentioned, our recommendation is approval of conditions. I discussed the development agreement condition. The applicant is also required to obtain all building permits to dispose of all excavated materials more than 30 meters from the water. So don't dump any of the fill on the shoreline or on the slope, and make sure that you're not altering the natural drainage. If natural drainage is channeled or altered in a way that may impact slope integrity. So just make sure that you keep the grade as it is on the property. That concludes my presentation, and I'll take any questions.
Okay, Councillor Ackley,
I have no questions.
Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So a couple questions. One is, and I you answered this already. I assume, not knowing the requirement, that 2-story was a limitation, so we weren't creating a visual barrier for other residents, but that's not the case. This is strictly, as you explained, it's a matter of not being able to use it as a dwelling. Is that correct?
It depends. I interpret those rules to be there's different reasons why you would have a 2-story restriction. The township doesn't have a 2-story restriction on houses, for example, but they do on garages. So one can interpret that as saying that you don't want garages to dominate a streetscape, for example, right? So there is the potential that what you're discussing are called view sheds. The view sheds are not disturbed by 2-story garages, but I don't think that's the main intent of those rules. I think the real main intent or the crux of the tool of the restriction is to ensure that you're not adding a secondary dwelling unit above the garage, and to make sure that people aren't building these massive garage structures and then living in like 800 square foot homes. At the time, that was the ideology. In urban design when these types of zoning bylaws came into place. So they've just kind of remained ever since. But if I look at the modern interpretation of what the intent of the zoning is, my opinion is that it's to prevent secondary dwelling units and to make sure that garages don't dominate residential areas.
And a follow-up question, if I may, Madam Mayor. So is the applicant on record with agreeing with the the agreement for it, sorry, the development agreement. Is the applicant on record as saying they are in agreement with that requirement?
So through the mayor, I've talked to the applicant about it and they seem to be okay with it. Are you okay with the development agreements? Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Bolton?
I think you answered my question. That was if it's gonna be a secondary residence and there's an agreement, that covers what I'd love. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Jablonski?
Thank you, Member. No, it sounds like it's pretty straightforward. The height would be the only thing concerned about, but as long as it's used as a bunkie, like having the kids over for the weekend sort of thing, I don't see a problem with this.
Okay, and just for clarity, the intent of this is for a games room type of thing. They already have bunkies on site. And that, so going back to the intent, and the development agreement, a development agreement, can that carry forward if the property is sold later on?
Absolutely. So the purpose of the development agreement is specifically to tie it to the property, not the property owner. So whatever agreements made now by the property owner today is going to be the same agreement that's in place when a new property owner buys the property.
So what are the teeth of that mechanism? Does that have to be written into the development of the agreement, and that if there's a sale and I can see a realtor easily saying, and this can be converted over and supplement everything else and throw it out the window, what are our recourses?
The development agreement is tied to the title of the property, to the ownership information. So when a person does their due diligence in purchasing, their lawyer should be able to flag for them what type of agreements are registered to the property. It's the same as if you're going to buy a property and you have like an easement on your property for hydro or bell, or your neighbor has a driveway across it. That typically comes up through the due diligence process of a lawyer.
Okay, so do we need to have a bylaw to have teeth to it, is my question.
No.
All right, and the other point you had is the septic system is not going to be subject to this particular application further down the line, so we still have a barrier and that can be put in place if possible, and that, but it sounded that it wasn't going to tie into the existing septic, that it was going to tie into a new septic.
No, so there's only one septic on the property. That septic system is going to be replaced with a new, more modern system. And the garage is going to be tied into that existing septic system. So it's all going to be on one septic system. That septic system is more than 30 meters from the water. So planning and council do not see that application. That goes directly to the building department. So it will be up to Marcel to issue that permit.
Okay, so the age of the septic system would be taken into consideration. They're aware that it may end up having to get redone. And that was this initial structure, and that was built before all these restrictions were put in place. So I'm gonna assume that that septic is probably 30, 40 years old or more.
Yeah, I think that the septic system is aged, but I do know that the applicants are looking at upgrading the septic system and putting a new septic system in place, so at least a new septic bed for sure.
Okay. And none of the existing bunkies are going to be removed at this point in time, correct?
Correct. The bunkies are going to remain. There are two accessory structures that are going to be removed, for those used for storage.
Okay. And I guess my final piece is, basically the first structure in that, because of the new laws, and that was never conforming, so we're actually going along with continuing with non-conforming.
That's right. That's right. So there are certain rights that people have when their structures are what are called legally non-compliant. So it's just a continuation of the use, just added on to it.
Okay, because the point of check on that we don't end up with a whole slew of people that have a lot of non-compliant areas and using them as precedent setting.
This is not precedent setting. This is, yeah, non-compliance is a complicated issue as far as land use planning goes, but it's, there's no precedent being set here.
Okay. All right. Any further questions from council? Any further questions from the public? Do the owners want to make a statement of any way, shape, or form? No. Okay.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Saunders, seconded by Councillor Jablonski, that the public meeting of council held October the 14th, 2025, adjourn.
Okay, it's adjourned at 9:50. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Congratulations.
Thank you.